How can them tell us about Ukraine war? How can them tell us about Israel? How can them launch an arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu? Yet they are ignoring and keep silence on the serious massacre which is taking place in Democratic Republic of Congo for 30 good years. Democratic Republic of Congo, the second largest country in Africa continent, with beautiful nature in animals and forests. A country which have the beautiful soil to plant anywhere and you get the results. DR Congo, it is indeed blessed by God with different mineral resources, and because of its resources, people of Congo, they've been living a miserable life for more than 30 years now, where there is a endless war, and no one is talking about this. If you look on the mainstream medias, no one is talking about this. Instead, they rather prefer to talk about Ukraine and Israel and not for people of Congo. But there is one Congolese man who came out and break the silence and demonstrate the hypocrisy of the Western in DR Congo. And here we are talking about Dr. Mukwege, who came and exposed the mafia of the Western.
Je m'appelle Denis Mukwege. Je viens d'un pays.
My name is Denis Mukwege. I come from one of the richest countries in the world, and yet the people of my country are among the poorest in the world. The abundance of our natural resources, gold, coltan, cobalt, and other strategic minerals, fuels conflict, which in turn causes extreme violence and abject poverty in the Democratic Republic of Congo. For over 2 decades, the Congolese people have been massacred before the eyes of the international community. The people of my country urgently need peace.
Since 1996, the Congolese, they've been the victims of war and massacre over their mineral resources, which many people want to put their hands on it. Congolese people, they have to go through different kind of sufferings in the hands of those who want to benefit from Congolese minerals. And people have been committing this kind of crime in Congo. There are hundreds of groups of rebellions which are well being financed by the Western and their allies who are found in Africa borders. Many people have died over this war, and we are talking about more than 13 million people who have lost their life in DR Congo. Yet no one is talking about it. Not even CNN or BBC can talk about this kind of things. These massacres have left many people on the run and used the child soldiers and the rape of women as a weapon of war. This crime, it has been committed with impunity and mastercraft left uncovered. Yet no one is talking about this. Now the question is, how can such a thing get to happen only to people of Congo? To understand the recent history of the Democratic Republic of Congo, we need to go back in 19th, when the country used to be called Zaire under the leadership of Mobutu Sese Seko. Mobutu Sese Seko led for 32 years since he took power after eliminating Patrice Emery Lumumba. But because of his aging and the sickness, well, his dictatorship, it had to come to its end. The neighboring Rwanda end up having serious conflict among themselves, which will affect definitely Democratic Republic of Congo. Between April and July 1994, up to 1 million men, women, and children were massacred over there in Rwanda. And this crime was committed by a certain group of militias and the Hutus who were fighting to take over the power. This was indeed a civil war. We then saw the Tutsi army, which was formed in exile in Uganda in 1987. They came in and they end the killings. A new government was established in Rwanda. Since the Hutu could not win this war and the Tutsi came and took over, well, the Hutu, they were left with only one choice than to flee the country. That is when they end up going in Zaire. Among these refugees, there were militias, Hutus, and armed people who were involved in all this genocide which took place in Rwanda. So as they were entering the Republic Democratic of Congo, that is when the real conflict started between Rwanda and Congo. These Rwandan refugees, they were settled at the borders between Congo and Rwanda in a very bad conditions, but they had no choice than to live there for that moment. The Hutu militias who were among these refugees, they end up start now imposing their leadership on other civilians on how they will have to go and fight back Paul Kagame in order for them to regain back the power which they have lost. This refugee camp, it was a very big threat to Paul Kagame and his ally Yoweri Museveni. So they had to do something about it. And both of men, they end up warning the United Nations. In order for him to protect his power, in order for him to remain in power for so many years, well, the first strategy which Paul Kagame had put on place was for him to talk to the UN by asking them to remove these refugees from the place where they were located to give them another location.
Peace and stability in Rwanda and in the region will depend upon what the international community can do and how swiftly it can do that. Sending right and strong signals to criminals and addressing impunity in the region is for sure the best solution for all of us. I told them many was the most important thing were two. One, the responsibility lied with the international community to disarm these people, because we think the whole aim is to cut out the genocide again. We shall not accept it. And that if the international community cannot do something about it, we shall have to do something to do about it ourselves. I didn't go into details of what we were going to do.
We had begged Mobutu to remove these refugees from the border to deep in Congo, according to the UN regulations. He had refused. We had begged the international community to separate the armed people from the refugees. They had refused. So it was deliberate. So this was a public warning to Mobutu. And I said that if the reaction started new trouble, we would provide the solution, not themselves.
According to the international law, when refugees are welcome in a certain country, they are not allowed to be sent within the country if their case is not being solved or if they are not being accepted by these countries welcoming them. And that is one thing which Paul Kagame, with his ally Yoweri Museveni, they failed to understand, because they were trying to protect the power of Kigali. Remember again, Yoweri Museveni is being considered not only as a Paul Kagame ally, but is being considered as Paul Kagame godfather, because it is him, the man who have trained Paul Kagame for several years in Uganda before Paul Kagame get to return in Rwanda in order for him to be in possession of the power. So, since these two men, they had asked the international community to decide about these refugees, and the international community, they could not be able to give them what they wanted according to the international rules of refugee. While the two men, they end up finding this as a good opportunity in order for them to invade Democratic Republic of Congo. So we then saw the Rwandan army, the Ugandan army, alongside with the new created rebellions of Congolese, which was led by Roland Desire Kabila. They had to go and invade this part of Congo. Laurent Desire Kabila, who've been a public figure and an opponent to President Mobutu Sese Seko for many years, whom Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni have to use in order for them to go ahead and defeat the government of Zaire, because they could not do what Paul Kagame and Museveni they had asked of them. Paul Kagame's mission in Zaire was to destroy this refugee camp, take all the civilians back in Rwanda, and kill each and every Hutu militia who was in this refugee camp. Now, here's the problem. As soon the Rwandan army, they have crossed the border in Zaire, they end up committing their first massacres. And this massacre took place in a hospital where sick people, they were located. And this hospital, it was run by Denis Mukwege, the same man who end up exposing the hypocrisy of the Western.
En fait, le premier massacre qui s'est commis.
The first massacre happened here in the hospital. So essentially, the war started here.
How many were killed?
30 patients and 3 of our employees. When someone can kill a patient in bed and not be prosecuted for the crime, that shows the circumstances we're living in today.
Did you know who the rebel leader was?
Not at the time. We had never heard of Kabila before the attack on the hospital.
Were there any legal consequences?
Never. I believe that this is where the impunity began.
Since then, things end up getting worse because the Rwandan army allies, they end up attacking a province called Bukavu. That is when they end up also attacking the refugee camp of these Rwandans who were located over there. You can only imagine what they did in order for them to even put hands on that refugee camp. Oh yes, there is people who saw what exactly happened in October 1996.
Le 29 octobre 1996.
On October 29, 1996, Bukavu was surprised by widespread shelling. We woke up to a lot of bombs. Rwandan shells were falling on Bukavu. Within days, thousands had died. We will never know exactly how many. We buried them in mass graves because the whole place started to stink. The crows could no longer fly because they had eaten so much human flesh. The dogs got fat eating the rotting bodies.
Kagame's regime sent soldiers to destroy the camp. We were bombed for a night and a day. So we moved on because we couldn't stay on the Rwanda-Zaire border. There were many deaths. The Rwandan troops crossed in speedboats and shot at us in the tents with heavy weapons to massacre and exterminate us. They drove us out. They set fire to the camps and drenched them in blood. We had to flee from South Kivu into the interior of Zaire.
As UN human rights officer in Kinshasa, we were witnessing the advance of Ugandan, Rwandan, and Burundian troops across the country, ostensibly led by Laurent Desire Kabila as the head of the AFDL. But this coalition was progressively advancing across the country, and as they advanced, we were receiving reports of large-scale massacres of refugees.
In order for you not to be killed, most of these refugees, they returned back to Rwanda. But hundreds, thousands of them, they went inside deep Zaire because they did not want to remain in that refugee camp. The Rwanda army and the FDL, they end up feeling like their mission is not well accomplished. So they start hunting these people in order for them to eliminate them before these people get to go somewhere in Zaire and get to recruit themselves in order for them to come back and fight the power of Kigali.
We crossed Congo and the great forests on foot. There was nothing to eat, no water, no toilets. We all aged. Both children and adults were emaciated to the bone.
What did you eat in the forest?
In the forest, all there is fruit from wild-growing trees. Anything that's not bitter, you can eat. Fruits or leaves. Even these ones here, if it isn't bitter, it can be eaten. We came across a cassava field and fed ourselves there. We destroyed whole fields. More than 20,000 people were on the move, and we had nothing. So we destroyed the fields of the Congolese. Sometimes we stayed in forests where there was no field and no village. Those who got malaria or diarrhea stayed behind. My mother died. I laid her body by the side of the road and I kept walking.
Les gens ne savaient plus où se trouvaient les réfugiés, la communauté humanitaire notamment.
People no longer knew where the refugees were. The humanitarian community didn't know either. They were scattered in the forest. We flew over the forest, following the road to Kisangani. In Lubutu, we saw a crowd in the forest, the likes of which I had never seen. To this day, I've never seen another crowd like it. On the way back, we used the road as a landing strip and discovered thousands of Rwandan Hutu refugees starving to death in the forest. It was the first time I looked hell in the face.
In the territory of Tingi, the first humanitarian convoy traveled for the first time just to find out on how people are laid in the race and dying out of anger and lack of medicine. Yes, it was very bad, as the image shows. Today, there is not any trace of people who have died. Do you know why? Because the forest and the bush, it had carved them up. So it is even very hard for you to tell that there were some people who died beside what remains, which we can't show it here because it is even more disgusting. Many people did die indeed.
And the baby? It's not hers. Is it alive?
Those who managed to make it at Tingi, we are talking about more than 200,000 refugees who managed to make it over there. Well, the Rwandan army and the Kabila's troops, they prevent the humanitarians to go ahead and help these people. These people who need a serious help. They need food, they need medications, they need all these things, yet these people, they stop on their way and prevent them for these humanitarians' heads to reach the camp.
Beaucoup sont morts. Des milliers sont morts. Parce que des milliers ont été massacrés.
Thousands were massacred in Tingi Tingi. These are truths that certain people in power at the time wanted to cover up.
Ont tenté d'étouffer. L'ONU sait qu'on a massacré des réfugiés.
The UN knew that Rwandan Hutu refugees were being massacred in Congo. They can't say they didn't know, because the UNHCR was here in Kisangani. But at the time, the balance of power was shifting in favor of Rwanda. After the Cold War, Mobutu was to be removed. So people kept quiet and did nothing.
And there were many Congolese who saw everything and recorded on how there were serious massacres which took place and they killed so many people. They end up throwing them in bushes. They end up creating their own places in order for them to hide the evidence.
Bodies were gathered, were burned, buried to hide the evidence. But there's a very serious group of crimes that were committed south of Kisangani that I think have never been investigated to satisfaction.
They were Rwandan troops. Although they had insignificant Congolese leaders to sort of Congolize the fighting, but they were Rwandan troops with Rwandan commanders. James Kabarebe was here himself, and another commander, who was none other than Joseph Kabila. He was here. People saw him.
Did they know about the massacres?
Of course. Without them, nothing would have happened.
During that time, at the head of a Rwandan army, they were having James Kabarebe, who's the right hand of Paul Kagame until today. Because after all this conflict, we saw how James Kabarebe ended up becoming one of the most powerful men in the Rwanda regime. But James Kabarebe, he was not working alone because he bring another young soldier, no one else than Joseph Kabila, who's the son of Roland Kabila, the leader of this rebellion group that was fighting Mobutu Sese Seko in Zaire back then. On the road to Kisangani, James Kabarebe, who's the leader of Rwandan army, ended up arresting a couple of Hutus, and they were on their roads going back to Rwanda. Different ONG and the Red Cross, they were asked to be ready to welcome this refugee on their way so that they can treat them and give them all the necessary treatment that they need. But guess what? When they show up, what they found among these refugees which were in these trains, well, is what shocked them. They end up finding hundreds of thousands of refugees who died among these refugees. The Rwandan army, it had committed serious massacres one after another. But on the other side, the rebellion leader, Roland Kabila, he could not do nothing. What can he do? Because this is what he have to pay as a price in order for him to take over Mobutu Sese Seko with the help of Rwanda and Burundi, who were his allies. By now, the rebellions, they have conquered almost the whole country. So what do you need to understand from this so far? The agreement or the deal between Paul Kagame, Yoweri Museveni, and Laurent Desire Kabila was that since we asked Mobutu Sese Seko to give us these refugees who were located in that camp and he refused to do so, well, as we are going to work with you, Laurent Desire Kabila, since you are so desperate to take over Zaire and become the president, we are going to help you fight Mobutu with one purpose. As we are going to invade Zaire with an excuse of saying that we are going to take over all the refugees who are located inside Zaire borders, you, in the meantime, you are going to attack Mobutu government and fight him. So now, when these things are taking place, many young people who were tired of the leadership of Mobutu start supporting Roland Desire Kabila, and that ended up making it even more easy for him to conquer power in Zaire. These rebellion groups, they did not fight at all because there were no one who could resist them in order for them to defend Mobutu, because everyone, they were tired, and this ended up making things even more easy for Roland Desire Kabila to take over Kinshasa.
We have huge armed forces. The rebellion is what's called a national democratic revolution. In other words, it's the revolution of an entire people in all its ethnic diversity, rejecting the methods and practices of the Mobutu regime. Everyone knows it has been a police regime and a bloodthirsty regime for years.
In the meantime, some of these refugees, they were on their way to Bandaka. They have traveled all the way from Kisangani, trying to reach out the river in order for them to cross it so that they can find help on the other side of the river. But unfortunately for them, they were also massacred.
At the time, I was provincial director of the Red Cross Emergency Services. The team leader came into my office and told me there was an influx of people traveling in an endless column. There was no end in sight. More people kept coming, thousands and thousands of them. As soon as they arrived in Umbandaka, they were massacred all along the road.
C'est ici le port de Lunatra où les réfugiés
This is the port belonging to the UNATRA Transport Union. This is where the Rwandan Hutu refugees had to take the boat to get to Iribi. But the boat couldn't leave because the boatman had fled. He had gone home when the rebels entered the town. The refugees got onto the boat. The soldiers opened fire on them all. They were all shot. People fell into the water by the dozen. Even the ones who were still standing on the quay were massacred, literally massacred.
They dropped bombs and grenades and fired bullets until you couldn't hear anything. Some fell into the water, others lay scattered on the ground. It was a witch hunt. They killed us. The killers were our Rwandan Tutsi brothers, not the Zairians. They were not Congolese.
We collected the bodies that were lying all over the streets. We dug the big mass grave here and buried all the bodies.
How many?
A lot. We worked in the rain. We picked them up with vehicles, brought them here and threw them in, back and forth, collecting them. We didn't have time to count.
On May 17, 1997, Laurent Desire Kabila took power with the soldiers. Among them, there were soldiers from Uganda and Rwanda who helped him in order for him to chase a man who've been in power for 32 years. And here we're talking about Mobutu Sese Seko, who had fled the country and died in exile in Morocco. We then saw Laurent Desire Kabila declare himself as the president of Zaire. 11 days later, he sworn in as the new president of Zaire in front of thousands of people gathered in the stadium. Among them, we saw some of African leaders, such as Yoweri Museveni, who was one of his allies.
Moi, Laurent Désiré Kabila, je jure fidélité à la nation.
We then saw how he renamed the country from Zaire to the Republic Democratic of Congo. And according to the rule of democracy, Kabila is supposed to be organizing elections, but he refused to organize elections. He even had the guts to ban all political parties in his country. Instead, what he did in his government, he ended up nominating one of Paul Kagame's right hand, and here we're talking about James Kabarebe. And this man was nominated as the chief of the staff of the Congolese army. I never seen such a thing, to see someone who's a soldier in another country to be nominated in such high position in another foreign country. Again here, this was a sign of showing that Laurent Desire Kabila, he was indeed at the service of Paul Kagame and Museveni, who had tried everything in their power in order for him to be in that position. So now that he's having this position, of course, he have now to recompensate them by nominating them in a very high positions in the Congolese army. Now, when all this was taking place, the United Nations, they could not just keep quiet about it, because this time they have now to hold the new president to accountable of what had happened during his journey in power. So what the Secretary General of the UN had to do was to send a group of people to go in Congo so that they can start investigating of all these massacres. But before they reach in Congo, of course, we saw Laurent Désiré Kabila was the first one to jump in the front line to come and defend himself on how good and professionals these soldiers they've been.
We respect human rights. We have come to enforce human rights and end the brutal dictatorship, the history of senseless killings that is the culmination of 32 years of Mobutu rule.
Now, here's the interesting part. Laurent Kabila, in order for him to protect himself and his allies such as Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni, who had helped him to commit all these massacres in Congo, of course, he have now to obstacle all the members of the United Nations whom they had sent in Congo. So he could not give them an easy green light so that they can go ahead and start investigating of all this crime which has been committed in DR Congo.
Kabila had very few ideas about how to form a government, about how to establish democracy. He had been in guerrilla warfare almost all his life. So I told him pretty clearly, look, it's important that you come out of this massacre commission cleared. You should know that there are elements that seriously compromise you and your troops. But if you refuse to cooperate with the UN mission, you will no longer have any help from the international community. We want you to accept this commission. You will undoubtedly be blamed, but after all, it will be behind you. I remember Kabila listening intently, but his ministers were all against me.
We, at the time, I remember, we said, no, the commission must go to the place where we have assistance that massacres have taken place, anywhere in the Congo, but where it is indicated that we have had massacres starting in the east and then going up to the west. Richardson came to insist with the president. What do you want me to do? Mr. Mickelson said. I hope you allow these people unrestricted access. And the president agreed, acknowledging they would go everywhere.
The president promised us that his government would cooperate with the United Nations mission to investigate the massacres. Investigators are expected on July 7th. This is a major step forward.
Aujourd'hui, nous entamons la 4e semaine de notre séjour en République démocratique du Congo. Nous avons donc demandé officiellement l'autorisation de nous rendre à Mbandaka, mais nous attendons toujours l'autorisation de nous déployer sur le terrain.
After sometimes these United Nations delegates, they were allowed in order for them to proceed with their mission. But the worst part was that the government of Kinshasa, under the leadership of Laurent Désiré Kabila, he had to send a group of people to go ahead in all these areas since they're supposed to start this investigation in Bandaka. So he had to send his militaries to go ahead and start threatening up each and every person who's supposed to be revealing the truth of what they have seen. In other words, they were trying to delete all the evidence which is supposed to be incriminating them.
The
UN started an investigation in Umbandaka because it was recent. That was hell for me. The order came from Kinshasa to wipe away the traces.
An order from President Kabila?
Of course. We were supposed to dig up the bodies and remove them.
Après quelque temps, je vois c'est le maire de la ville qui débarque.
After a while, the town mayor came into the office. He asked me to show him where we had hidden the bodies, where we had buried them. He pressed me. I said, Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to do that. He He left. Another jeep came with a soldier. He came in and angrily pointed his finger at me. Who do you think you are? I said, okay, kill me, and Kabila will appoint you general in the morning. I didn't kill anyone. I just buried the bodies. I can't do what he wants me to do. I won't do it. He threatened me with his revolver, then put it down and said, you'll see. I was supposed to be kidnapped and taken to Goma, so I hid. They had formed a team of young people for the operation. They were told to dig up the bodies that were in the mass grave and other places. They dug them up with machinery and dumped the bodies into the river.
So it is even more obvious that Laurent Desire Kabila did not want for this team to go ahead and do their job more freely. He was intimidating them. They were under pressure. They were not even making their job become even more easy because they wanted to hide each and every evidence which is supposed to incriminating where is Laurent Desire Kabila with his allies such as Rwanda and Uganda who had supported him by committing all these crimes. So these delegates of the United Nations later on, after 10 to 11 months, we are talking about between the 1997 and the 1998, they had to pack their belongings and go back to the United Nations to give their reports.
Laurent Desire Kabila clearly did not want this team to succeed in its investigation. The team was harassed and intimidated at certain points in time, often in the field, of trying to investigate. They packed up, left the country, and submitted their report to the Secretary General.
After that, the reality started hitting up on Kabila. Because the Congolese now, they were revolting themselves because they end up realizing that no, these people who came here and pretending to help us in order for us to take over power from Mobutu Sese Seko, actually they're not here to live. They're here to stay because they want to benefit from our mineral resources. So what should we do? Of course, now they were busy calling loud, shouting at Kabila, putting Kabila under pressure so that he can get rid of these foreign armies who were located in DR Congo. Kabila was left without no choice than to chase these Rwanda and the Ugandan soldiers. He gave them 48 hours in order for them to leave Congo. And we then saw how these soldiers of Rwanda and Uganda, they were all humiliated and they left the country. But 2 days later, they crossed the border again, returning in Congo. That is when the second war in Congo began. Because remember, these people, they had their own reasons to be in Congo. And after they had succeeded, they now want to start benefiting from Congo because they have to come and take revenge of what had happened during the genocide of Rwanda, of not only eliminating all the army groups which were among the refugees, but this time they were coming even to loot the Congolese minerals. Now that the men whom they've put as the head of the state in DR Congo end up turning his back against them, well, that is when they become even more crazy. Now they want to do it even by power. Once again, the country was divided. Congolese high demand mineral resource was covered by these rebellions of Rwanda. We're talking about gold, cobalt, diamonds, name it as you wish. All these minerals was under the hands of this rebellion. Now, these Rwandan and Ugandan soldiers who had left Kinshasa, now that they decided to come back in the country, they have to find another reasons that can keep them in that country. And in order for them to resist or continue occupying all these minerals, they have at least to use certain kind of Congolese who can be at their service in order for them to continue looting the Congolese minerals. So what they did now, they bring some Congolese, they put them in the front lines, and then they hide behind them so that these Congolese, they'll be attacking the government of Kinshasa.
La rébellion commence son œuvre destructrice.
The rebels began their destruction. On August 2nd, 1998, we were still hearing shots, still burying thousands of dead. We still saw houses destroyed by bombs and shells, just like 2 years before. The same Rwandans returned across the same border. There were massacres in all the villages.
Guys, now here's the thing. These soldiers, when they were coming, they were not killing in order for them to defend themselves. Actually, they came in a very strong mission to destroy each and every existent things, burning house and doing any kind of crime in order for them to be the only one who have to be resident in that areas.
Soldiers weren't killing to defend themselves. They seemed to want to exterminate everyone. Villages burned. They killed old women and children. They disemboweled babies. They were like wild animals. Why did they kill their brothers? Most of them were Congolese.
Actually, when Rwanda first invaded Congo, they went after Kinyarwanda speakers. They went into the refugee camps of Rwandans that had more than 500,000 people in those camps, and they surrounded them and started bombing them. That's we've got that in our books, like people's testimonies of what happened in those refugee camps. They're doing that now. They're going into refugee camps and destroying refugee camps. How do you know, and how can you tell the difference between a Hutu, a Tutsi, another ethnic group in the Congo, a Luba or whatever other group in the Congo, from a Kinyarwanda speaker when you are shooting indiscriminately into the crowds? You can't tell, and it's just a really bad excuse. And anybody that believes it, they believe it because they are just supporting the Rwanda government, not because it's actually the truth.
By then, there were now even more rebellion groups which was burning each and every day, all of them being supported by Rwanda or Uganda in order for them to defeat the government of Laurent Desire Kabila, who have turned his back against them. Each of these rebellion groups was being sponsored by the foreigner countries. Almost all the neighboring countries of Congo, they seized this as an opportunity in order for them to come and start now stealing the minerals from Congo. Again here, it is always the victims who have to pay a high price from all this.
Aïe, 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 faites vite, faites vite.
Just imagine that. A chief of soldiers in the front line, in a war, smoking a cigar. Isn't it that interesting?
Non, 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 ne changez pas l'objectif. Moi, changez l'objectif. Kakawana. Un peu en bas. Négatif, négatif.
Dame.
This war continued this way. Many people were killed. We are talking about innocent children, mothers and fathers who have lost life. These rebellions, they even attacked and killed people inside the church. Just imagine that.
People came here to worship on August 24th, 1998, St. Bartholomew's Day, children as well as adults. Rwandan soldiers immediately surrounded the church. They killed the people with axes. 139 people were massacred right here in the church.
The violence was probably more widespread in the Second War than in the first one, although the numbers of civilians killed are so high in both wars. But in the use of rape as a weapons of war became really, unfortunately, very widespread. And unfortunately, we documented massive rape, massive killings, burning of entire villages, all sorts of massacres that you can imagine.
Now that these rebellions, they were in possession of the biggest large of the country. They are the one who were in control of everything, whether it is with minerals and their own government around. Of course, they start now fighting among themselves. And here I'm talking about Rwanda and Uganda, who have to fight now over, not in their countries, but they are fighting inside another sovereign country, the DR Congo. They are fighting not because they want to bring peace in this part of Congo. No, they were fighting because they want to be the only one in possession of these Congolese minerals. So they were fighting over the Congolese minerals. Kisangani, one of the largest province in DR Congo, became their battlefield. On June 5th, the city was bombed and there were many people who lost their lives.
There were bodies lying everywhere. Others were buried by family members. It's proof that they murdered us.
The 6-day war was the height of barbarism by the Rwandan and Ugandan armies. There were diamonds and gold traders here. Kisangani is the fulcrum between the east and west of the country. The foreign armies fought for control of these strategic mineral resources.
The Ugandans were on my left. They had taken possession of a trading post there. The Rwandans were on the right. They met at this crossroads. In those 6 days, 6,200 bombs fell on the city. Everyone wanted control of the local diamonds. They were a means to fund the war, but of course, it was also plunder.
L'objectif était clair. C'était s'ouvrir la voie.
The goal was to secure access to Congo's mineral resources without any formalities. Present-day Rwanda is proof of this. It is now one of the world's leading exporters of rare minerals, such as coltan, cobalt, and niobium, and it has got there by systematically plundering Congo's resources.
Mon pays est systématiquement pillé avec la complicité des...
My country is being systematically looted, and the people who claim to be our leaders are joining in. They allow the looting in order to get power, wealth, and fame, at the expense of millions of innocent men, women, and children living in abject misery. The profits from the minerals end up in the shady bank accounts of predatory oligarchs. Anyone who ignores what is happening is complicit. It isn't only the perpetrators of violence who are responsible for their crimes, but also those who deliberately look the other way.
Si la guerre dure toujours depuis si longtemps, c'est parce que de groupes armés mafia.
The war has been going on for so long because armed gangs, rebels, and the military are robbing Congo of its natural resources. I've always compared the Democratic Republic of Congo to a jewelry store with no doors, windows, or guards. Everyone goes in and helps themselves. Instead of that, the mineral resources could be providing us with a path to peaceful development. Yet these natural resources are the cause of our misfortune and misery. Today, we are one of the poorest countries in the world. It's incomprehensible.
Questo computer è sporco di sangue. Like all our technology, this computer is stained with blood. All its components carry the stain of war. It's about financial gain. Murder and mutilation don't matter.
The UN has recorded more than 90,000 cases of conflict-related sexual violence in the north going into 2023. And that's a figure for 1 year only and for the whole of Congo. The UN has published the figure of 123,000 rapes and gender-based violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which represents one woman raped every 4 minutes.
And an overwhelming responsibility which points the finger at Rwanda present in eastern Congo with its army. And what is Belgium doing? Nothing, nothing. Why these two weights?
Two measures.
In Ukraine, we intervened immediately by voting for sanctions, by providing support to the military. We supply weapons, but nothing compared to the
Congo. This is a scenario where the Rwandan army could not act without the backing of American imperialism. Without the support of the United States of America, this is impossible. You know you're watching because a small country like that cannot intervene in its neighbor without significant Western support.
Each action of the militias, every tragedy, condemnation, support with no further action. The capture of Goma by the M23 marks a significant juncture once more. There was only support for the DRC and condemnation of M23 and Rwanda. Yesterday, our embassy in Kinshasa and several others were the targets of inadmissible attacks. However, these reprehensible acts say a lot about the perception by local opinion of inaction, of the international community in the face of war crimes committed in the Democratic Republic of the
Congo. Congo is too far away. Ukraine is next door. They are our neighbors. It's much easier. And then Rwanda. Rwandans are serious people. They are considered stable partners. It is an authoritarian regime with a president elected with 99% of the votes, but a stable regime, belligerent, but stable because above all we need gold, diamonds, cobalt, coltans. Yes, I dare say, sir, I would like.
So it is more obvious that because of the Congolese minerals, it is what had bring a curse upon them that made everyone to be envy in order for them to go ahead and put trouble in Congo so that people of Congo, they'll continue dying while these minerals, it is something that benefit other people out there, especially the Western. In their conference, different events that they have to participate, they are all aware of what is happening in Congo. Yet they are denying the Congolese people right to live their life peaceful because they need something from these minerals in order for them to invent and develop their own economies.
Que vaut la vie d'un Congolais?
What is the life of a Congolese person worth? You get the impression that people in Europe are prepared to do anything to get access to coltan and gold. Sometimes this happens unconsciously, because a lot of people are unaware, but often it's deliberate and cynical. Just look at how the European Parliament votes. The law that requires companies to check their supply chains when procuring minerals was only adopted by a majority of 3 out of a total of 750 votes. So half of the members of the European Parliament think you can kill in order to access resources.
Qui considèrent que pour avoir accès aux ressources, on peut tuer.
On January the 16th, 2001, a tragedy hit people of Congo. President Laurent Desire Kabila was assassinated and shot in the head by his own bodyguard, who was also eliminated immediately after he had killed Laurent Desire Kabila. The reason for killing Laurent Kabila, we'll leave it for now because it is a story for another day. But here's the funny part, like always in Africa, if one leader die, the son have to come and take over. And this time it was Joseph Kabila, who's the son of Laurent Kabila, who have to come and take over the power in DRC. They did not even bother to organize the elections in order for him to take power. Joseph Kabila back then, he was still in his 20s and he had little political experience. 10 days later, he was sworn in as the president of the DR Congo.
Moi, Joseph Kabila, président de la République démocratique du Congo, je jure fidélité à la nation.
Joseph Kabila, he became the president in a country where there is a lot of rebellion groups who are dominating the whole entire country. In the meantime, on the other side of the country, massacre continued. They keep on unaliving people and throwing them in water.
Les massacres du pont Chopo ont été dirigés par Laurent Nkunda en personne, parce que c'était lui.
The massacres at the Chopo Bridge were led by Laurent Nkunda. He led the 7th Brigade, which controlled Kisangani. He was the military commander on the ground. That same day, this death squad moved into the community of Mangobo and shot at anything that moved. They mainly targeted young men, young people in general, and they shot wildly. Unfortunately, women and children also lost their lives as a result of these reprisals. It is true that General Amisi, Tango 4, was there, and Commander Biamu Bernard was also there. But the operation was led by Laurent Nkunda.
Laurent Nkunda was indeed the warlord. The Congolese Tutsi who came all the way from Rwanda used to be the right hand of Paul Kagame during the genocide which took place in 1994. Is one of the people whom Paul Kagame had to send back in DR Congo in order for them to continue fighting the government of Kinshasa. In 2006, back in Congo, he formed a rebellion groups along with Rwanda called National Progress for the Defense of People. This ended up spreading even more killing in the eastern part of Congo.
Ça c'est notre chapelle.
This is our chapel. This is our flag, our banner. Anyone who accepts that Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is our brother. I became Pentecostal. Originally, I was an Adventist. The underground struggle does not prevent me from continuing this religious mission. The shepherd has a duty to protect the sheep. If the threat is armed, then the shepherd must protect the sheep from that armed threat. This is our doctrine, Christian righteousness.
This man, Laurent Nkunda, had the support from the higher level.
Sense that this man Nkunda, like him or not, and with whatever mistakes you could hold him accountable for, he has some political grievances that are legitimate.
We then saw the government of Kinshasa giving the arrest warrant against this man for the crime which he had committed against humanity. Later, he was arrested in Rwanda. Since then, he never answered to his crime that he had committed in Congo.
It was particularly shameful that many of the people involved in human rights violations, they were taking a plane and showing up in European capital for medical treatment or for shopping, while at the same time they are massacring the population in the streets of Kinshasa, Lubumbashi, Goma, Bukavu, or Kananga.
By 2001, Democratic Republic of Congo, they've been at war for at least 5 good years. Massacres and other type of killing, and also the rape of children and women. It had left this country damaged in the way that you can't even imagine. The United Nations announced a mission to protect the civilians who've been going through all this. Up to 18,000 peacekeeping troops were deployed in Congo between 2001 to 2022. That was the largest and the most expensive peacekeeping mission in the entire world. That was not all, because the UN have also sent some investigators to go ahead so that they can try to investigate the whole situation to understand who's the mastermind behind all this.
Il y a eu une attaque sur un village avec des tueries, des viols, des pièges, etc. Et on a pu parler avec.
There was an attack on a village with murders, rapes. and looting. We were able to speak to around 500 people who were living in camps. For us, it was clearly a case of the mass killing of civilians. What we had not expected were the cases of cannibalism. We saw children with their arms cut off. People with scars. We listened to stories and were shown pictures of mountains of severed heads. The scale of the horror was unimaginable.
Now, you might ask a question, where was the Congolese when all this was happening? Well, there were those Congolese who stood up also in order for them to come and defend their patriotics. And they were one rebellion groups which came called by the name of MLC, led by a businessman, Jean-Pierre Mbemba.
Nabino na recrue na ningi na pesa bino liboso félicitations puisque na tango ya bitumba wana namonaki makasi na bino abanga liwate pe abanga munduki te abanga masasi te. C'est comme ça que eloko tolingi armée na sikao tolingi bino bozako yekola lelo oyo tobengi armée à libération na Congo kwa bokota boko malobi ba acteur effectif ya libération.
Jean-Pierre Mbemba is a public figure from Equatorial. He's a son of one of the biggest businessmen back then in Zaire during Mobutu Sese Seko's government. He started this movement with the heritage which he had inherited from his father. But of course he had also his supporter, which was Yoweri Museveni from Uganda. So Yoweri Museveni was one of the big supporters of Jean-Pierre Mbemba by supporting him with different guns in order for him to continue with his mission in Democratic Republic of Congo. Now the advantage which Jean-Pierre Mbemba had, it was to have some former soldiers of Mobutu Sese Seko, which is different compared to one of Laurent Nkunda, which was composed of Rwandans.
Jean-Pierre Bemba's soldiers had 2 or 3 days to get their pay by looting and raping because they didn't get anything from Bemba. They entered every house, looted it, and raped every woman they came across.
But Bemba will not be held accountable.
This is a political decision. The person at the top would have to decide that the priority was to end impunity in Congo and to listen to the victims.
Here's the fun part. Not just that Mbemba was brought to justice for what he had committed as a crime in DR Congo, but he ended up becoming the beneficial of those who had to participate in dialogue that took place in South Africa in Sun City. In 2002, a deal was signed between the government of Joseph Kabila and all these rebellion groups with the support of the Western. Surprise, isn't it? Because all these rebellion leaders, they came in the government. Jean-Pierre Mbemba, he was nominated as a vice president of Republic Democratic of Congo. In 2006, the Republic Democratic of Congo, they end up having their first general elections, which was rigged by Joseph Kabila, by the way, that end up raising again a lot of conflict, even though Kabila had to sign in.
So that people can devote themselves entirely to their work and do so in peace and serenity.
With all the conflict that happened between Jean-Pierre Mbemba soldiers and Kabila's soldiers because of the election which was rigged, well, Kabila ended up settling in power, and this time it's gonna last for so long. At the end of the day, he have also to pay a very high price.
Major, je vous remets ce drapeau, symbole de votre commandement. Vous le garderez et défendrez jusqu'au sacrifice suprême. Aux ordres.
One of Kabila's policy was to integrate all these former militias into the Congolese army. Most of them, they were the former rebellions. And many had committed serious crime in Democratic Republic of Congo. Now they will have to enjoy a free humility coming from the government and the part of this dialogue, which some of them they will be nominated in the high position in the militaries. Just imagine that. In other words, these war criminals, they were brought in the government without them being charged for the crime which they had committed against humanity.
There's been pressure for peace in the Congo, and that's led to negotiations where armed groups are in fact brought into the Congolese military, but don't really change their colors. It's, as we say in English, to let the fox into the chicken coop, and in fact make him an officer in charge of protecting chickens, and that simply doesn't work.
In 2008, there was a lobbying which took place in the United States of America that they need a serious investigations for what had happened in DR Congo for all these years. Well, that had left the United Nations without no choice than to sit down and find a way out in order for them to send a group of people who have to go and investigate more properly and see what have really happened in the eastern of Congo. Well, we then saw how the United Nations choose about 25 investigators, including 30 human rights specialists, to go ahead and investigate this crime in Congo. Well, all these people, they had only one mission in their agenda. It was for them to go ahead and try to investigate the kind of crime which had took place between 1993 to 2003. And the result of this mission was known as the mapping reports.
What was really important for me in the mapping report was this was the first effort of the United Nations to try to document and tell the story of the suffering of millions of Congolese, and in doing so, to try to put an end to the endless cycles of violence and impunity that we've seen over since the beginning of Congo.
And then there were political challenges, because there were many who didn't want these investigations to happen, because they feared, legitimately or not, that it would destabilize the region and bring out skeletons from the closet. When we deployed teams, they were finding out more and more cases, and at one point they had to stop investigating because we didn't have time. So I'm actually convinced that, unfortunately, our catalog of massacres is incomplete.
As part of publishing any report from the United Nations, our practice and our policy is to share a draft version of the report with any member state concerned by the report. So we followed our usual practice and shared the report first and foremost with the government of the DRC. And we did the same thing with Rwanda.
There were several governments that protested, particularly the Rwandan government, and that threatened to withdraw UN peacekeeping troops if the report was published.
They thought the report was based on allegations that were simply unfounded, that it was politically motivated, and they asked that it not be published.
And while the debate was ongoing, the report appeared in Le Monde, a French newspaper.
It's a result of a leak.
Yes, it was the result of a leak.
Okay.
Probably someone who was not entirely convinced that the report would be published and it would be published in its integrity, decided to leak the report.
C'est une personnalité politique de premier plan qui a organisé cette fuite.
A prominent political figure organized this leak. At the same time, I contacted the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and especially her press department. They saw that this project was underway and asked me not to publish the report until the final version had been finalized.
De ne pas le publier tant que la version originale n'est pas sortie.
We refused and decided to print the report.
Et voilà, nous décidons donc de publier ce rapport. Et tout ce que l'on constate,
all the facts and everything that is presented and described in the mapping report speaks of systematic killings in refugee camps, killings of children and women. The description of these massacres and their systematic repeated execution could lead to charges of genocide.
Peut en effet conduire à une accusation de génocide.
Who are the perpetrators?
Les acteurs de ce génocide.
According to the mapping report, the perpetrators of this genocide belong to the Rwandan Patriotic Army. That is, the regular Rwandan army. So the responsibility lies at the highest levels of the Rwandan state.
Back in Congo, a court has been opened to judge and condemn those who had committed this massacre. Well, this court was just a fantasy because it had no power to condemn whoever had committed all these crimes.
Voilà le rapport mapping de près de 600 pages.
This is the mapping report, with its almost 600 pages. The report, which I am holding in my hands, documents more than 600 massacres committed by all parties involved in the conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. These areas are littered with mass graves. One day, this court should be able to investigate the question of accountability. This is an indictment. May the words truth and justice which are written above this courtroom also apply to these massacres. More than 1,230 victims and witnesses of these massacres were interviewed by investigators. The mapping report describes the violence that was committed.
À cette époque. Mais la base de données, elle contient la liste.
But the database also contains a list of the alleged perpetrators of these massacres, rapes, and lootings.
Ces viols, de tous ces pillages communiqués par les victimes, par les témoins. Cette liste.
This blacklist is still locked away in a drawer or in a vault at the United Nations High Commission in Geneva.
Coffre-fort du Haut Commissariat des Nations Unies à Genève et pratiquement aucune juridiction.
Virtually no court, national or international, can access it.
Ou international ne peut aujourd'hui s'en servir.
Au moment où je vous parle,
as I speak to you here, a report is gathering dust in desk drawers. This investigation explicitly names victim locations and dates. But the perpetrators are cleverly omitted. What needs to happen for them to be named? Let us have the courage to name the perpetrators of crimes against humanity, so that they do not continue to torment this martyred region.
In the US, for the first time, the Senate have to sit down, and they had this meeting dedicated to the crime and massacres which had took place in Congo. They had to sit down at least to see on how they can handle these matters, because the crying of Congolese, it is now too loud. Well, in 2017, the Senate, they end up taking the first step by sanctioning several key players of these massacres who were close to President Joseph Kabila, by sanctioning them. Like always, their bank account was frozen and all their visas applied was rejected. And the European Union did the same. But what about Congo itself?
A few dozen trials have been held for what's probably tens of thousands of violations and serious crimes. It's just a drop in the ocean.
The crimes in the DRC are inexplicable and unacceptable. Human life is no longer sacred there. In which country that you know or have visited are people buried alive while the international community remains silent?
For more than 20 years, the UN troops in Congo, they had only one mission, which was to neutralize all these rebellion groups and took the gun from them and bring peace so that the civilians should not suffer the consequences of all this. Yet they failed. They failed to bring peace in DR Congo.
In all of this, the main question I ask myself is, if you try something for 20 years and you don't get any results, isn't it time to change something? You have to change the system. You have to change the method. That's the central question for me. How long will this mission continue? How long will the donor countries keep providing troops and money?
In Congo, MONUSCO, they've been criticized by people for failing to protect civilians after 20 years of them being in this country. A lot of money being thrown away just like that, yet they are not able to protect people of Congo, regardless of what kind of crime can be committed right in front of them. They are powerless and they are not able to even stop the war in DRC.
It was a Monday, around 5 a.m. The Hutus broke down the door and came into the house. They demanded dollars. I said I had no idea what a dollar looks like. They took my daughter and her child, and also my son and his wife, and walked down the street with them, singing. Then they shot them. One of them came with a machete to where I was lying. He gave me a single blow with it. I didn't even cry. He looked at me and saw that my hand was hanging by a scrap of skin. I stayed where I was. He looked at me and hit me twice in the face with the machete. I didn't say anything. I didn't even cry.
The MONUSCO camp was only about 800 meters away from where the massacre took place. They were there, but they did nothing. Men, women, and children died. We thought we had the best protection because we lived right by the MONUSCO base. But in fact, the opposite was true.
The men were dismembered. Their throats were cut in the presence of the UN, and nobody reacted. They were not even buried. They were not thrown into mass graves. The 17 or 20,000 blue helmets in the Democratic Republic of Congo could eliminate the armed groups in 30 minutes. But their mission was to observe.
Because of this impunity, Congolese anger have boiled over. In Kinshasa, people have taken in the street to attack the MONUSCO base because they were no longer happy of their behavior. These people, they were angry because they said that this so-called peacekeeping, they are not able to bring peace because this so-called peacekeeping, it is not the right name that they're supposed to be called.
Recent demonstrations have shown that the UN mission in Congo is no longer wanted. People say all it does is coldly count the victims. In fact, the real reason for the UN mission is to prevent anyone from counting the dead and injured. We are allowing total impunity from generation to generation. An entire nation is being sacrificed, but the pendulum could also swing the other way. We are sitting on a powder keg.
In August 2016, violence broke out in Kasai, a province which just recently separated. Here, two worlds was set against each other. On one hand, the power, money, and diplomat which was set all the way from Kinshasa. On the other hand, there were those who believe in traditionals, those who believe in the authority of their chief and commander, no one else but Kamwena Nsapu. This man wanted to return to the old tradition. Him wanting to do things in the traditional ways, this did not seem to occur with the government of Kinshasa. Well, in order for the Congolese government to assure their authority over the traditional leader, this man was killed in August 12, 2016 by the Congolese army. His death ended up revolting many people who believe in him, and it was all a big drama from village to village. Well, this was a revolution which magic and ritualists play a very big role. For an example, it was when you will see some villages, they will practice some magic in order for them to not be killed by bullets. Why were they doing all this? Of course, they were doing it with one reason, in order for them to go and face the government army, which was coming to stop them.
On voit les jeunes gens Young people between the age of 6 and 18 could be seen everywhere with red ribbons around their foreheads or on their arms. They had knives and small wooden sticks. These young people attacked the heavily armed soldiers. They had performed and believed the bullets could not harm them.
These people mainly used sticks in their rebellion against state power. They thought these sticks could shoot bullets. They also had some traditional guns, but it was often women and children who attacked the security forces. The Congolese army harshly put the rebellion down.
Now imagine on one side we are having people who are having traditional weapons, knives and some sticks on their hands, and they believe they are well protected with this ritual by saying that they have a protection against the real bullet. On the other hand, we are having militaries who are having guns which is having the real bullet. Can you just imagine the strategy that have to take place? Well, a lot of these young men and women, they were all alive by the law enforcement who were also trying to stop this kind of behaviors. Well, at first, Joseph Kabila, who was back then the president of Congo, denied these massacres. And we then saw his foreign minister who have to go and say it again, that this footage of these people being unlived, it was all manipulated. But looking at this image did not lie at all, because the image speaks for itself. But the authority of Kinshasa had to deny everything because they know what could have been their outcome.
Mon pays est victime d'attaques terroristes.
My country is the victim of terrorist attacks by certain armed groups, particularly in the province of Kasai. Their aim is to destroy the peace we have achieved and to undermine our development efforts.
According to a lot of reports, the military invaded houses and killed people, always under the pretext that they were terrorists. It was actually the civilian population.
Well, that did not finish there, because after his return from the United Nations, Joseph Kabila had to recruit even more police from other states to send them to Kasai so that they can go and try to find the solution on how to stop these people. But once the police arrived there, well, they were so brutal toward the villages. They were busy attacking and torturing people.
The situation in the Kasai regions is also deeply preoccupying, with severe abuses against civilians by armed groups and multiple human rights violations committed by Congolese defense and security forces. We were very disturbed about the increasing numbers of reports of mass grave sites in the Kasais when the fighting was really beginning to increase.
We were able to locate over a period of 1 year 89 mass graves. The translation of that is probably between 5,000 and 10,000 civilians being killed by the armed forces under destruction to do that. Displacement of 1.5 million people, many of whom fled to Angola.
During the police operation, well, they were also ambushed by these militias. Well, Kamwena sub-militians who had to disarm all these police and take over all their guns, as you are getting to see it in this video. At least them, they were not being killed by these militias. And this time, it was these rebellion militias who had to film all this video with their cell phones.
Atrocities were committed on both sides. During the investigations, we came across the same atrocities as in Kivu, Ituri, as in Rwanda during the genocide.
The government of Kinshasa ended up sending another specialist troops in the province of Kananga in order for them to go and try to see on how they can solve this problem once again.
Et qu'on a beaucoup d'initiatives. Et vous en avez commis, vous en avez voté. Donc, aussi longtemps que au coup final, comme nous qui allons faire, ah, et vous bandez pour ramasser ma monnaie de la sauce. C'est un jeu. C'est un jeu très délicat, très important.
Those were two terrible nights. They went from house to house.
Who are they?
The soldiers. They went from house to house and killed everyone they found. Old people, pregnant women, children. Those were two agonizing nights in which they killed 417 people. That's why I say it was a bloodbath. That's the only word for it. It was terror.
Ça, c'est le carnage. C'est le seul mot qu'on peut dire. Nous avons vécu la terreur.
The brutal violence in Congo seemed to not ending. Massacres have devastated the country in Kivu, Kasai, Ituri, Equator, Katanga. While it is impossible to list it all, because this is the tragedy of Congo, a country where violence is met with silence, a country where people are being killed day and night, yet no one is talking about it. But the victims, they are trying to break that silence. In Gaza, some of them, they are trying to break out this silence with the help of their lawyers. They get military officers to listen to their complaints and record their conversation.
Did the soldiers kill other people besides her son?
Yes, many in our village. They buried the people there where they died.
Who buried them?
The soldiers.
What should the state do with those who killed and raped?
It should kill them too, because they abused us.
Enter your name here and sign. Were others killed here in Ganza or just your son?
They killed a lot of people. At that time, no one could go out to identify or bury the bodies of their children. They looked for boys in the houses to kill them. They said there should be no more boys in Nganza. My beloved son. My beloved son.
No crying here. You should have stayed at home if you wanted to cry.
Mom, tell them what happened to you. Stop crying.
My son's story makes me cry.
This man here needs your explanation so the state can do its job. Be brave. Don't cry.
Est-ce que Koji Bantu Bajuma Beba victime directe et indirecte? En fait, pas victime indirecte. Batuba Shiba Bantu Babu Mungaze, Mobaji Kwan. Tu m'as coupé mon âne. Batuba Shipa, et Kabatuba Shipe. Batuba Shipa en Bangagne. Bende Banozel Chungani. Munaba Bantu Batu Bibi Bintu Bia Bantu Bantu Abatu Baship Bantu Babu ni ba violer ba maman ba vuni chakwenza objet wa poursuite judiciaire Bwane aba Bantu abajibika le bende le sans problème ba mena ka kwene boluto baba kwata baba nyoka bi servir de leçon bokuba mukampanda.
Il y a un lien évident entre les crimes commis dans le passé au Congo et les crimes qui ont été commis au Kasaï.
There is a link between the crimes committed in Kasai and those committed elsewhere in Congo. The crimes were committed by the same soldiers. I was able to identify some of the units. They are the same ones that committed crimes in 2013, for example. At that time, the military justice system even demanded the arrest of the soldiers, but never succeeded. One name that came up in connection with Kasai was that of General the then head of the military region. He was also identified as a perpetrator who committed crimes in South Kivu.
Eric Rur Rimbere, responsible for murder in Congo. He executed soldiers, women and children. Despite all the massacres that he had committed in Congo, of course he was promoted in the high rank in the Congolese army. He still holds this position up to today. This man is a living proof that the army itself, it is a serious terror to the people of Congo.
The perpetrators of what's going on in the Kasai today, I think very few of them fear justice. And they have confidence in the culture of impunity, and that they can use the cruelest of methods, the most vicious of attacks against civilians, and get away with it.
I hope one day these bastards will be convicted. I'm ready to testify before the International Criminal Court about what I have experienced, so that these people are arrested and convicted.
Si ces gens sont arrêtés et jugés un jour, donc pour moi, ce sont tous des gens à foutre en prison.
All these people belong in prison. There will never be enough prisons in Congo for these people. The best thing would be to build a big wall around the parliament, the president's residence, and the ministries. That way they'd be locked up in there for life.
In 2019, Joseph Kabila was pushed and obliged to leave power even though he did not want to do so. The international community and the Western who've been entertaining him to be in this position for all these years, they had to ask him to leave power, and he accepted to do so through an election. Felix Tshisekedi took the president as the new elected president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But did Kabila step out of political stage? Does the new leader have the power to take control of everything? Does the new leader have the capacity to break the silence and take all these criminals to court? That was the question which each and every one. This end up waking up people to descend on the streets and start calling for the reopen of this mapping report, which has been there for 20 good years. Survivors of this massacre, men and women and children, including even lawyers, they heard the calling of Dr. Mukwege, who've been trying to push in the international level so that this mapping report can be finally open. These people that are calling for the International Criminal Court, these people that are calling for the UN to do something against everyone who had committed this massacre to unlive human. These people, they want all the perpetrators to answer for the crime which they had committed against humanity.
Je rêve d'être dans une salle d'audience.
I dream of standing in a courtroom where competent lawyers make their case before independent and impartial judges.
Intègre et impartiaux.
I dream that at the end of this project, the truth will come to light about war crimes and even genocide in my country. Crimes that must shake the conscience of humanity. I dream that people of the Great Lakes region will forgive and reconcile in order to plant a tree of peace in the heart of Africa.
These men and women that you have seen so far in this report that we had just bring for you, well, they represented only the victims of people who had survived from all this massacre. The massacre that took place in Congo for so many years, yet no one is talking about it. The massacre that is being ignored by all the international courts and the United Nations. Among these victims, there are those ones who have lost their loved ones. Children lost their parents. There is men who have become disabled. They are no longer able to provide for their family. There is children who could not be able to continue with their studies anymore because they were located in the bush and they are not able to be going to schools. What about those women who've been raped? We're talking about 4 women which are being raped each and every minute. Can you have an idea of how painful it is for this family to be going through all this? Yet, those who have committed this crime, those who have committed this massacre, they are free out there. Some of them, they are being well protected in Rwanda, such as Rurankunda, Bosco Tanganda, and many more. There is a report out there which have the facts and the names of those who have committed this massacre. Yet no one is trying to stop these people and ask them the question why they have to do this. Paul Kagame with his army, they will leave Rwanda in the morning and cross the border, go to Congo and kill people with their M23. They will come back in the evening and they will deny everything, even when the signs are showing that the Rwandan troops that are in Congo, yet the men keep on denying everything. For how long will this have to continue? Why is it that the only crime which the Western have to believe in, it is the one that is happening in Ukraine against Russia, Israel against Palestine, and not what is happening to people of Congo right now? Why is it that the war topic which they can discuss on their mainstream media, it is only what is happening in Europe or somewhere where their advantage are being well protected, and not what is happening in Africa continent? Why they are not calling for these people who had committed all this crime to come forward and answer for their crimes? Are they waiting for these people to die one by one? Are they waiting for this report to disappear page by page in order for them to start doing something about all this? What about the victims whom have survived from all this massacre? Don't you think that they deserve to have a closure for what had happened to them and to their loved ones? People of Congo deserve peace. People of Congo deserve to live in a peaceful country like everyone else. Leave us your comment. Tell us what is in your mind. Tell us your opinion so that we can have to understand exactly what we need to do in order for people of Congo to have the peace that they deserve. Thank you so much for taking your time to watch this video. We really do appreciate your presence. Before you leave, make sure that you give us your thumbs up. We really do appreciate that. If you find something beneficial in this video, well, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this to come. Until I see you again, for now, continue to be yourself, be good, be kind, have respect for everyone in order for you to be respected. May God bless you all. I'll see you again very soon in our next video. Ciao, ciao.
Emma.